Diving into the Andromeda's arpeggiator or sequencer can sometimes be unpredictable. Sometimes they seem to do something unexpected, or worse, nothing at all. Hopefully this tutorial will be able to shed some light on the Andromeda's tempo synchronization functions. The clock module is Andromeda's internal tempo source. The tempo knob gives you a fine degree of control over the clock timing. Normal allows the clock to be free running without any regard for events. The key down option will restart the clock each time a key is pressed. To modulate the tempo of the clock by using a voice trigger, mod voice will determine how the voice modulates the clock. When the synchronization source is set to local, Andromeda controls the tempo. It is also possible to use incoming MIDI data, for example, from a drum machine connected to the MIDI in port. Clock out will send messages to the MIDI output for use by other devices. The clock can have its timing modulated by another source, causing the tempo to slow down or speed up. The Sync Mod button is used for assigning these modulation sources. The only possible destination here is the clock rate. To demonstrate the LFOs, I'll start with an initialized patch. One of the modulations for the oscillators already assigns LFO1 to pitch, so I'll just increase the value above 0 to hear the effect. Let's look at the LFO1 parameters. The sawtooth waveform is selected, and the pulse width is set above or below 50%. It will toggle between ramp up and ramp down. The triangle waveform can also achieve all the possible variances between an up saw or down saw by adjusting the pulse width soft knob. If polarity is positive, the level can be increased above 25% for a clipped waveform. On the trigger page, we see the LFOs can be started in a similar manner to the envelopes. Refer back to my tutorial about envelopes if needed. On the synchronization page, sync source will determine which time source the LFO will match tempo. Select local if you want the LFO to run at the rate shown on the wave page. Clock will assign the LFO timing to the clock module. Period size will establish the LFO rate in tempo. Andromeda recognizes 24 ticks as equal to a quarter note value. Smaller values produce faster rates, and bigger values produce slower rates. MIDI can synchronize the LFO to incoming MIDI timing messages. If no incoming MIDI timing messages are received, the Andromeda will default to a very slow speed. The LFO mod page is a powerful feature that can modulate a handful of the LFO parameters using other modulation sources. On the wave page again, notice selecting a random wave produces a smooth transition between random points. If you want more of a classic old-school computer sound that uses sudden stepped pitches, modulate the oscillator pitch with the Sample and Hold module. Clicking the Sample and Hold module View button shows its source defaults to using voice random to produce stepping values. One of my favorite LFO tricks is to add a pulsing modulation to a sweeping filter pad. Oscillator 1 and 2 will have both triangle and saw waveforms. Set the pitch for both down an octave. In the post filter mix, turn up the filter 1 low pass and turn down filter 2. In filter 1, set the cutoff frequency low and the envelope 2 amount around 66. To make a simple filter sweep sound with a slowly evolving envelope 2 contour, set attack to 3.6 seconds, delay 1 time to 1.8 seconds, delay 2 time to 3 seconds, release 1 time to 3.5 seconds, and release 2 time to around 7.5 seconds. You can change the shape of the contours to suit your taste. Going back to filter 1, assign mod 1 to LFO1, which modulates the cutoff frequency to an amount of 28. Settings for LFO1 will use a sawtooth wave and reduce the pulse width below 50% to achieve the ramp down shape. You can ignore the rate value because we will be synchronizing to the clock. Go ahead and leave the polarity on bipolar. Go to the sync page and synchronize with the clock module, and set the period size to 16th notes. The result is a pulsing, modern pad sound. The arpeggiator will take a played chord and generate a set of notes, played in succession. The arpeggiator is highly programmable via the configuration page. Local BPM will set the tempo and run at a quarter note value, only if the sync source has been assigned to local. Length will vary the note duration by varying the release to time of the envelope. Octave will affect the transposition of the notes being played. Center will position the middle notes accordingly. Type affects the direction of the played notes. If the chord setting is turned on, you will hear the chord being played in addition to the notes. The latch soft button, when it is turned on, will enable the arpeggiator to keep on going even after you let off the keys. You can see the arpeggiator is active with the run setting. The trigger will determine how and when the arpeggiator is being activated using some event other than using the start-stop button. The trigger page is again similar to the envelope triggers. The progressor page transposes the arpeggiator by a set number of halftones for each cycle. For example, if the progressor is set to 1, minimum is set to 0, and max is set to 12, the arpeggiator will play the entire 12-note scale, starting at the root note until it hits one octave higher. If you wish to disable the progressor, leave its value at 0. Sync source parameters are the same as before: local, clock, and MIDI. Step size will determine the note duration in ticks. If you want an eighth note, then that would be half the duration of a quarter note, or 12 ticks. The sequencer is very similar to the workings of the arpeggiator, but the sequencer doesn't care which or how many keys are being triggered, but spits out a predetermined set of events. For example, you can play one key and have the sequencer regurgitate up to 16 different note values. In fact, the sequencer doesn't have to generate notes. Its output values can be used instead to modulate the filter cutoff frequency, for example. The graph page is where you assign each step to a note value. On the configuration page, the key trigger setting can be turned off, which will defeat notes from being output. Returning to the graph page, notice that the steps are now displaying numeric values instead of note values. Length sets the number of steps the sequencer will have. 8 steps and 16 steps are common. The Use Keyboard setting will enable you to press the keys to enter the note data instead of using the soft knob. To do this, the sequencer will need to be stopped, which you can access any page using the Run Soft button. For each step in the sequence, there are actually 4 different parameters that can be programmed: note, velocity, gate, and type, which determines if there is a note or a rest. The first 3 of these values don't have to serve their obvious purpose. The first 3 values are actually levels A, B, and C, and can be individually repurposed to modulate any of the other available function on the Andromeda. Type is simply a switch that is only available to the sequencer functions and not as a modulation source. Start out with the pulsing sweep patch. Bring up the resonance to 69 and reduce the envelope 2 amount to 18. We're going to change mod 1 from LFO to sequence level A and kick the level up all the way. In the sequencer settings, set the step length to 8, the loop type to rock and roll. Make sure the key trigger is on and the Use Keyboard is on too. On the sync page, check the clock is the source and the step size is 16th notes. On the graph page, make sure the run is turned off. Enter the notes using the keyboard to have these values: C0, F0, A0, C0, G0, A0, F0, and C1. Now turn the sequencer run to on. Use the clock knob to set the tempo to 120 beats per minute. While holding a key, slowly bring up the filter 1 frequency cutoff. In envelope 3, reduce the release 1 time for shorter note durations if you desire. For more interest, bring up the oscillator 2 frequency to -5. To add even more interest, go to the voice mix module, bring up the pan modulation, and assign that to LFO 1. Here I'll make the level be 80. Go to the LFO 1 settings, change the waveform to square, set the pulse width back to 50%, and the synchronization period size to 1/8 notes. Save the patch to a new location, and next I'll show you how to synchronize the delay effect. You may have already noticed the Andromeda's built-in delay effects has no beat or tempo matching parameters. Delay times are simply measured in milliseconds. If you want to synchronize the delay, you will need to use a simple formula. Starting with the number 240,000, divide the tempo in beats per minute, then multiply by the note duration you wish the delay to have in the form of a fraction. Basic algebra dictates that you can simply divide by the note value. In the case of an 1/8 note, we would simply divide by 8. Using our rapid transit patch, turn on the effects, set it to mono delay, and bring up the send to around 90. I want a quarter note delay. So starting with the number 240,000, divide by 120 beats per minute, then divide again by the number 4, which represents a quarter note. Set the delay time by the result, 500 milliseconds. Bring up the feedback and turn off the low and high cut. You have only scratched the surface of these powerful functions which can be used to modulate any number of destinations on the Andromeda. I have found the Andromeda to be an endless source of inspiration and hope you find these tutorials useful. Thank you so much for watching.